Joins us with more from Washington. Nick, we just saw how Nancy Pelosi, how Tim Walz, Bill Clinton, and other star speakers addressed the Democratic Convention today, and it marks the close of the convention today. Very quickly, let us get more from you as to what were the highlights of the four-day convention which was held.
Well, one night still to come. This was the end of day three. Heavy hitters on day three, of course, culminating in Tim Walz, the Minnesota governor, accepting the vice presidential nomination. Bill Clinton, he's no stranger to convention speeches. This was his 12th consecutive one. He had an opportunity to address the hall. He spoke for a long time, but he used it as an opportunity really to lay out the dangers, as he sees them, of Donald Trump returning to the White House. He said that Trump is all about dividing, blaming and belittling, and saying that he curates chaos. That surprise appearance from Oprah Winfrey as well electrified the hall in Chicago. She also drew that comparison between the Harris campaign and the Trump campaign, saying that it was all about Harris's optimism over Trump's cynicism, and saying that voters should choose common sense with Harris over nonsense from Donald Trump. And Tim Walz, he gave an electrifying speech. It was a short speech, but it was packed full of energy, an opportunity for him to introduce himself to America, because remember, it's only been 2 weeks since he's become a household name. Just over 2 weeks ago, many people outside of Minnesota had not heard of him when he was picked by Kamala Harris to be her running mate. He gave it as an opportunity to draw comparisons between Harris and Trump, but also to bear in mind that he comes from small-town America, and therefore he hopes appeals to those Midwestern working-class voters, saying that he can appeal to Republicans who are perhaps worried about Donald Trump because he has spent much of his upbringing, but also his time as a public servant working with Republicans in the places that he's lived.
All right, Nick, it's an all-guns blazing contest which the U.S. is witnessing, with the endorsement of Tim Walz, with the endorsement of Kamala Harris on one hand, and also J.D. Vance and Donald Trump's team on the other hand. Which way is the political contest, is the presidential race heading on in the U.S.? What are your evaluations?
Well, it's so difficult to tell, but we are now less than 80 days before November the 5th, the presidential election. And once we finish the Democratic National Convention in Chicago at the end of Thursday here in the US, it really is that breakneck race all the way to November 5th. The candidates knowing that they cannot waste a day at all. Also, we have seen this election really turned on its head in the space of just over a month since Joe Biden dropped out of his presidential bid. When he dropped out, he was trailing Donald Trump in nearly every single poll. Since then, we've seen a complete turnaround, and Kamala Harris is now leading or drawing close to Donald Trump in many of the major polls, showing that she's pulling ahead in certain important swing states that she knows she needs to win if she's going to have a chance of beating Donald Trump. But I think it's also worth bearing in mind that in the space of just 8 weeks here in the US, we had an assassination attempt and the dropping out of a presidential candidate. We've got just over 8 weeks to go until the election. It does feel still really as if anything could happen.
All right, anything could happen. Let's see how the days ahead pan out. Thank you so much, Nick, for joining us.